Hey Chloe, I think today is a good day for book club.
I think every day is a good day for book club, Katya.
Welcome to our podcast where we talk about the books that we buddy read. Since 2020, we've read over 150 books together.
We're going to cover what we like, don't like, and everything in between.
And we're going to start off with a non-spoiler review just in case you haven't read yet, and then we'll get into all of the spoilery details in a section later in the episode. But the book we're talking about today is The Night We Met, Abby Jimenez's newest romance book, which I think we were both intrigued by because we've liked some Abby Jimenez in the past. Like, Yours Truly is one of my favorite romance books ever, and I think that's in part just because it was there for me in a time when I really, really needed a comforting, happy romance book where the characters had such a wonderful relationship and seemed like they were really good matches for each other. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
theme that I've seen in a lot of the books, at least in that trilogy, like in Part of Your World, in Just for the Summer. I haven't read her first trilogy. I know she's written a couple of different, actually, I think three different romance series now. But her most recent book, Say You'll Remember Me, which came out last year, was one that I did not love. I, in fact, disliked a lot of things about it. And I remember that you had a similar experience.
I did, and I was disappointed because I also really enjoyed the previous series, the Part of Your World series. I thought that it was very complex, dealt with a lot of different topics, and added some more layers to rom-coms, which is something I like in a rom-com when it has a little bit more complexity to it. And so I was disappointed last year when we read the first book in this series because it just fell flat for me. I felt like the characters were maybe handling a situation really illogically. It seemed like there was a pretty straightforward solution, or at least like a better way to approach the situation.
Hmm.
And I don't want to go too far down that path, but it stood out for me in that regard because I felt like the Part of Your World series did the opposite, where it handled issues really well. So, coming into The Night We Met, I was a little apprehensive just because I wanted to love it and I was hoping that it would remind me more of the Part of Your World series. And I wouldn't say I loved it, but I liked it. It was better than the previous book, so I'm happy about
Yeah.
that.
I agree. I definitely think it was better than Say You'll Remember Me. I remember being so struck by the tonal difference of Say You'll Remember Me compared to some of Abby Jimenez's previous books, because there had always been, themes of mental health, sort of like
Mm-hmm.
darker, more emotional themes. But in Say You'll Remember Me, it just felt so dark and so heavy. And this
Yeah.
book, I think, has a similar heaviness, but I did just like it more.
And I felt like it handled the themes better than Say You'll Remember Me did.
Hmm.
There was a very clear tension between Larissa, our main female character, and Chris, the main male character, and they had their separate issues that they were working through, and they just were approaching them in, I felt like, overall healthier ways than maybe Say You'll Remember Me, where there was a little bit of like an avoidance.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting to like be able to compare all of these different books that we have read by this same author, because she has definitely grown a lot as an author. And I remember I read in the author's note, I think, at the end of this book, that she said that she's been wanting to write this story for a really, really long time, but because of the complexity of the trope and
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the moving pieces to make it feel um, respectful, or like for it to feel
Mm-hmm.
like it's being well done. She didn't feel like she was a strong enough author yet until now that she's had some success. But Abby Jimenez,
Interesting.
yeah, I thought that was interesting too. But she's an American romance novelist and baker, author of three series of romance novels: The Friend Zone, which came out between 2019 and 2021, the Part of Your World series, which we've been talking about, and then the Say You'll Remember Me series, which is coming out currently. She's the owner of a bake shop called Nadia Cakes, which she won Cupcake Wars in 2013. And
Really?
now, yeah, and now her bake shop has locations in California and Minnesota. I'm getting all of this information from the Wikipedia about Abigail Jimenez, née Hales. I would really love to go to this cupcake shop, especially like the way they talk about it in the books. I think they deliver, and maybe that is something that we will have to do soon. Maybe when you visit. Oh my
Yes, road
God.
trip. Oh, and that's amazing too because I was obsessed with Cupcake Wars back in the day. So
Oh,
now
really?
I'm in my mind I'm like, did I watch her on Cupcake Wars and
Mm,
not ever put it together in my brain that that was her? And
maybe.
wild. And worlds collide.
I
Anyway.
know. Well, it's interesting in this book, she says at the author's note, again, at the end, that
Hmm.
she wanted to include a mention of Nadia Cakes because in all of her books, it gets a little cameo where a character either goes there or mentions it or whatever. But in this book, she couldn't weave it in because one of the characters has a very severe nut allergy. And because there are nuts in the kitchen of Nadia Cakes, and because it wouldn't be safe for her to go there, or for people to eat things from there, it didn't feel like it would naturally be weaved into the story. And so that was the only reason that it wasn't mentioned, which I thought was, I don't know, I liked that little detail that she felt the need to mention it. Like, so sorry you didn't get the Stan Lee Nadia Cakes cameo in this book.
I That's so interesting too to think about it from the perspective of our main character Larissa who has the nut allergy because it still could have been something she wove in with like a side character as a mention or something, but I like
Hmm.
that she was so focused on being respectful to her main character that she just made the choice to, okay, I'm just going to not in this one.
Yeah,
That's cool.
totally. I agree. Yes. So getting into the book itself, it starts off with a page of content warnings, which was a longer page of content warnings than I'm used to seeing for a romance book. I think I've definitely seen them in romances before, but this was very lengthy, and the nut allergy was one of the things that it warns about.
I was surprised too, especially because even though I know that she has dealt with some of those heavier themes, I still, in my mind, when I'm going for a romance book, expect it to be maybe a little lighter in terms of general content. Which is just a perception that I have, but I don't think of it as a book that I necessarily am going to need a huge content warning for. So I was very surprised when I was reading it because I just wasn't expecting to see it. And then I also felt a little caught off guard because I wasn't expecting to see content warnings for such heavy themes. There was
Hmm.
like death of a parent, mental health, a lot of heavy triggers, alcoholism, gambling addiction, like a lot of addiction, a lot of grief. And I just was not prepared when I read the description of the book to see a content warning with those themes in it.
Yeah, the cartoon kind of rainbow cover with the fireworks, I think, does
Yes.
kind of lead someone astray. You're not going to want to judge this one by its cover, which I was trying to remember. Is there a scene in the book where they're watching fireworks
I
that
think
I'm
it's
forgetting?
the night they meet.
Oh, the night they meet where she goes home with his best friend?
Barefoot. Yep.
We'll
That
get to that. Yeah.
Stay
Yeah.
tuned for that.
Oh my
Yes,
gosh.
I think
Okay.
there's maybe fireworks at the concert that they're at when they meet.
I see. So them sitting really close to each other probably was not happening, though.
Now I'm looking at the cover. Hmm.
It's got some romantic undertones, which makes sense for a book like this, but I don't
I
remember this scene in the book.
I don't associate this particular scene that is represented on the cover with anything in the book.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe we're just given a sort of
It's
lovey
just a
dovey
vibe,
vibe. I don't
a
know.
lovey-dovey vibe.
Interesting.
So the night we met that is referenced in the title refers to the night when Larissa meets Chris and his best friend Mike at a concert, and they both offer to give her a ride home. And she goes with Mike because he's a little louder, a little more flirty. She like thinks that he is interested in her, and Chris is kind of standoffish and like a little closed off, and maybe he's just shy, but he in general is not showing the interest that Mike is showing. And so she gets a ride from Mike in his car in his truck, whatever, to go home. And she ends up dating Mike, and but as they are dating, Chris and Larissa start to become friends, and it becomes clear that maybe they are a little bit more compatible, and Larissa starts to wonder if she should have gone home with Chris on that night that they met.
Which I was curious about because I thought it was an interesting premise because I could not think of any other books that I had read that were boyfriend's best friend trope. This was my
Mm-hmm.
first time reading that, at least as far as I remember. And so I was very curious to see how it was going to play out and how they were going to form a relationship over the course of Larissa dating Mike. And this comes into play in the form of a dog that they adopt and co-parent, and that's kind of what ends up bringing them together. But they find this dog, a Yorkie, I think, right?
Yeah, yeah, something like that.
Some Yorkie terrier, something small. They find this dog, and it's covered in fleas. I think it has worms. It's very unhealthy. It's clearly been abandoned, and they just can't bring themselves to not take this dog and take it to their vet friend, who is the main male character in Say I'll Remember Me that we were just discussing.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, Chris goes home with the dog. He has medicine. He's trying to at least foster it for a while. But because of his job as a pharmacist, he doesn't feel like he can be around enough to properly take care of a dog. And enter Larissa, who offers to co-parent and stop by during the day to take the dog on walks. They can switch off on weekends. They can share this dog. And I was not expecting them to be brought together by a dog. I'm very curious what you think.
Contrived. I thought it was so contrived. I was like, this is so clearly a device for these characters to spend more time together, because otherwise it would have been very easy for them to just not hang out all the time or not be texting each other all the time. And I think that this allowed them the excuse to like text each other pictures of the dog. So I could see like I could see the cogs turning in Abby Jimenez's mind of like, how am I going to get them to interact even more? Because I think the initial thing is that Mike always asks Chris for favors, Mike being Larissa's boyfriend. They're kind of like just dating at the beginning and we see them become a couple. But Mike is always asking Chris on the days that Mike is hungover to give Larissa a ride or like help Larissa in such and such way. And so I think that's kind of like the inciting thing. At the very beginning, Mike is supposed to drive Larissa's mom to a surgery and he ends up not being able to, and so he sends Chris to do it. And like that made sense to me as like this is a reasonable reason for them to like be interacting. Knowing that Mike is like encouraging it and okay with it. But the dog thing, like I said, it felt very contrived. It felt very forced. I was like, this is obviously a device.
It kind of felt to me like in the first or early drafts of this book, one of them was maybe a single parent who needed help babysitting during the day, or like couldn't make the hours work for single parenting and just needed a friend to step in and support. And then maybe that didn't work out practically to execute one of the characters.
She made the child a dog.
So instead it's a dog, which is which is obviously different in care. And anyway, that's what it felt to me. I felt like it started as maybe a baby and over the drafts kind of turned into a dog. And I'm a very proud dog mom, but you know, it's not the same.
Sparky.
So.
We love Sparky, but the dog in this book it felt a little cartoonish, a little comical, like the way that it acted. Maybe it's just because like the kinds of dogs that I've had have been relatively well behaved, but I was like, this is crazy.
Yes, this dog
so
is just killing every animal it sees, small animal, snakes, frogs, anything in the yard, pulling raccoon carcasses out of the dirt. I don't know. There's some really crazy things. It falls in the toilet at one point, I think, and has somehow gotten completely drenched in toilet water. There's just some like really wild things that happen, and I guess my dog is too large to fall in the toilet, so maybe that is a thing that happens more often than I thought.
I don't know.
We should address the fact that the dog's name was Wolverine. which I found to be
Ooh, I
awful.
hated that. That was one of my least favorite things about the book.
I hated having to read it. And when Larissa initially suggests the name, Chris is like, "Yes, perfect. That's exactly what this dog's name is." And I said, "Is that because you like her or because you actually like the name?"
It's just because he likes her. Which that's a big thing in this book, is the emotional cheating that happens throughout the whole story. It's
Hmm.
kind of like the whole story, so I think if you're sensitive to that, maybe this is not the book for you. In fact, before we
Yeah.
get into some of our spoilery sections,
Yep.
we would not recommend this book if you have any sort of triggers for emotional cheating, as well as financial stress or PTSD. I think those are some really big themes that might be off-putting for people.
Yes, and they're carried on throughout the entire book. It's like an ongoing, obviously the emotional cheating just given the premise, but the financial stress in particular is the entire book. These things are ongoing. They're not like side plots, I wouldn't say. They're very woven into the story. So
Mhm.
you wouldn't be able to avoid them.
Yes. On the other hand, we do recommend this book if you enjoy.
Darker, more emotional romance, like we talked about. There's some heavier themes, but we really liked it. And if you like that kind of more complex layering, like we were talking about, this would be a great book to kind of see some of those themes of mental health be addressed, addiction, grief, like we talked about in the content warnings, I think are handled pretty well throughout this book, I would say.
Mhm. Also, if you enjoy like a taboo kind of forbidden romance, this one is
Mm-hmm.
definitely a controversial couple, both within like the characters themselves and then also in terms of like reviews that I've seen. So if you like to root for again a forbidden romance, I think this is maybe a good one too.
And if you like to see strong friendships, there's like a core, I don't know, 6 or 8 people who have really, 6 of them who are really close friends, and then another set of 2, so I'll say 8. And all of them have really strong friendships, both strong male friendships, strong female friendships. Chris and Larissa form a very strong male female friendship before they. Oh, you not agree? You don't think they're
Well,
friends?
yeah, no, I think they're friends, but I do think they have feelings for each other for a long time, so I don't know if I would frame it as like they're friends. I don't know.
Okay, I'll back up. Also, if you like strong friendships, there's a core group of 6, I think. And then Larissa and her best friend Lexi have a great friendship as well. So we see a lot of strong friendships, both male friendships, female friendships, that carries through pretty heavily in this book. And I guess this is not taking into account the boyfriend's best friend in that, but I will say it is part of the overarching issue of Chris and Larissa liking each other because Chris respects his friendship while he has these feelings. So,
Yeah, it's because he values the friendship so much that he doesn't want to risk the friendship by pursuing the his best friend's girlfriend. Which is like obviously that's good, but I think again there is an emphasis on like how close they are and how much it would like destroy their friendship.
and some people would care about that. Some people would maybe think that wasn't as important as these particular characters do.
Mhm. I would also recommend this book to people whose love language is acts of service because most of the things that Chris does to show that he loves Larissa are these like things that he is doing in order to kind of serve her or help her because he's not able to voice his feelings. He kind of shows her by helping her with things.
And with that, I think we're ready to get into some spoilers and go a little bit deeper into our review. What do you think?
I'm so excited to talk about some spoilers because there are some wild things that happen in this book. So if you guys have not read the book, you can leave now and come back when you have read it. Or if you don't care about spoilers and you just want to hear all of our thoughts, then you can keep listening. But either way, be sure to follow us and rate us 5 stars. That really helps us out, helps more people to find us. We have an Instagram and a TikTok, which you can follow at A Good Day for Book Club Pod. I think we're going to try to be a little bit more active on those. And if you guys have questions, comments, requests, thoughts about this episode, you can send us an email at
A good day for book club pod at gmail.com.
awesome. Okay, goodbye, non spoilery
Bye.
people. And now to get into the good stuff. This book is so juicy. While I was reading it, I would tell my sister like the different plot points that were happening because I was like, this is so drama. I feel like I'm spilling gossip when I'm talking about
Yeah.
this plot.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to do a similar thing with Kai. He wasn't really invested. Sorry, listeners, my husband was not as into it as as your sister probably was, but it did feel like kind of like watching like reality TV almost in some ways
Yeah.
because it was like Chris is very clearly lusting after his best friend's girlfriend to a point that I was like in some situations uncomfortable because it had to have been so obvious.
I'm sure it was, and it was obvious to some of the friends too, because I think Xavier specifically later in the book mentioned something to him. He's like, dude, you gotta pull it together. It's obvious. And Chris is like, what are you talking about? What? What
Like,
do you
what do you
mean?
mean? We're just friends.
We're just friends.
I just
Which,
shovel her
yeah,
driveway at 3 o'clock in the morning because we're besties.
that was a little over the top, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I was actually a little like put off by it.
Yes. So Chris as a character starts falling in love with Larissa, but the way that his love sort of manifests is this intense protectiveness. Like he's
Hmm.
constantly really stressed out about her nut allergy, which I think is good because he avoids them going to restaurants that use nuts. He is always checking her EpiPen to make sure that it's uh, the way it's supposed to be because he's a pharmacist and he knows these things. But he also takes it too far sometimes, perhaps.
Yeah. I got to a point where I was like a little put off by Chris because for the most part, at the beginning, kind of building middle, these sections, I thought that their relationship was like kind of fun to observe. And part of why I felt that way was because Larissa and Mike seem very clearly like not a good
Not a
fit.
good
It's
match, yeah.
so it was not that I was like actively rooting against Mike, I guess, but I did root for Chris and Larissa to get together because they just clearly have a more compatible relationship. But in some moments where Chris is like checking her EpiPen every time he's with her or like bringing up safety around nuts to her, there were just moments where I thought to myself, she's had this allergy her whole life. She knows how to take care of herself. Like, of course, it's nice to be taken care of. I would like that too. But from a guy who's not your significant other to be this over the top about checking your medication, making sure expiration dates are good, making sure you're set. I just kind of was like, she's a grown woman who is dating someone else. Maybe take a step back. She knows how to take care of herself.
Well, I think the point at me where the point at me, the point at which I thought, what am I saying? The point at which I thought that it got too far was when he got his own EpiPen to just have with him just in case something happened. And obviously that ends up being useful later in the book when they can't find hers, but he has one on him. But I was like, you just got your doctor girlfriend to write you a prescription for this EpiPen that you don't need?
And
Chris?
meanwhile, you're just like ignoring your growing feelings for Larissa as you're openly committing insurance fraud so that you could get her a second EpiPen should the situation arise where she needs one.
Yes, and like we mentioned before, he gets up at like 4 a.m. to clear the snow off of her car because he doesn't want her to have to do it. And he thinks that it's something that Mike should be doing that he's not going to do. And he's like, Larissa deserves this. She deserves somebody who is going to like shovel her walkway and make sure that her car is ready so that she doesn't have to be out in the snow scraping her own car, which I love that idea. Like, I would love for somebody to scrape the snow off my car because I hate doing that. But for him to get up at 4 in the morning and do it sneakily and not tell anybody, being, again, the best friend of her boyfriend, was weird. Was super weird.
Yes, and I think we should mention Larissa is weirded out by it because Mike comes over and is like, "Nope, wasn't me. Super nice that someone did that though." And she says rightfully, like, okay, but somebody knows my car, my exact apartment. They've come in the night so I don't see them to shovel the snow. Like, it actually sounds stalkery when you put it in that perspective.
Yeah. And that becomes one of the inciting incidents, like the drama of that and the extremeness of that, of Larissa being like, "Hey, admit that you have feelings for me," because that's an extreme thing to do.
Right. And especially because later we find out Mike knows or assumes, suspects that Chris is the person who came and shoveled the walkway. Like, he's aware of this. And even though he doesn't say to Larissa that it was Chris, it does make me want Chris to at least just own up to it, because everyone who knows you really well knows that this is something you would do, and you know where she lives because you're sharing a dog. Like, just, I don't know, maybe address it? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing that I did really appreciate about this book is that I think it would have been so easy in a different book to make Mike like a complete villain, like completely
Yeah.
irredeemable, completely awful character. But in this book, I felt a lot of sympathy for him. And
Hmm.
as much as I didn't think that he and Larissa were a good couple, I also was rooting for him to be okay in the end, especially considering some of the things that he was dealing with.
Yes, and when we first started reading it, I texted you this when we were talking about it, but when the book started, I was anticipating Mike was going to be kind of a stereotypical loser boyfriend, just the way it was kind of being set up. Like, he's
Mhm.
bailing on Larissa. He doesn't seem like he really cares that much about being there for her. But then we come to find out the reason he's not being there for her, not showing up for her, is because he's struggling with his mental health, which is leading to some alcoholic tendencies. He's getting very drunk on weeknights. He's not showing up to work. He's bailing. He's doing some unhealthy things because he's struggling. And I don't want to say that it was nice to see that, because that's not what I mean, but it was helpful to have some of that perspective on what he was going through and not just frame him as this bad guy or, like you said, like the villain. It was giving him a chance to have an explanation for those actions. And by the end of the book, he's working on them. He's trying to get better. He's trying to be healthy. So it gives him a redemption arc that I appreciated.
Yeah, and I'm very curious because I'm pretty sure the next book is supposed to be about him. He's supposed to
Mm-hmm.
be the romantic lead in that next book, so I'll be fascinated to see how that redemption arc continues, and whether we're able to see it on page or if he's going to have kind of like worked through a lot of his issues prior to the book starting, and just how that's going to be handled. But again, I liked that he wasn't, like you said, completely awful, because I thought it would have been very easy for him to be like a gaslighting, toxic, like awful person, and he
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, which I think is, it emphasizes like how much Chris was able to like see him as a friend and how much Mike was able to rely on Chris, and that like their friendship was strong, because I don't think Chris would have been friends with a guy who was a complete awful person. So it just like all made sense to me and made the whole situation a little bit more difficult and more tragic, that Larissa was just with the wrong person.
Yes, and especially because you find out later part of why she chooses to ride home with Mike at the very beginning of the book when they all meet is because Chris, like you said, is being a little standoffish, a little quieter, and she just comes to realize that that's more his personality. He's quieter, he's not as outspoken as Mike is. Mike's a little bit more of the extrovert, I'll say, and Chris is more introverted. And she realizes that some of the things Chris said that night, like, oh, but I live closer to Larissa, it would make more sense for me to take her, were him trying to make a move, even though it comes across as him suggesting that maybe Mike is going to be inconvenienced by giving Larissa a ride. So it's just seeing how her interpretation of the two guys from the night she meets them changes over the course of the book.
Yeah, it changes the more that she gets to know them. Because the other thing about that night is that Chris was in the middle of grieving the sudden death of a parent. And so, in general, I think as reserved and as introverted as he is, I think it was maybe even more dramatic on that night that they met. But I wonder too, when it comes to Mike, if some of his some of the way that he acted were maybe triggered by this relationship with Chris and Larissa and just how much he
Hmm.
could see of it and how much it contributed to what already was very serious insecurity.
Yes, and he mentions to Chris later on in the book, like, I think even subconsciously, maybe I was trying to push you two into situations where you were together because I knew that I couldn't be there for her the way that you can be there for her. And it's just as heartbreaking because it's hard to have those struggles, of course, but also to have the insecurities on top of it of like Mike talks about, I just waiting for the day she realizes I'm not good enough for her. Like she's gonna leave me. She's so wonderful. Like I'm not good enough for her, and it just becomes this really difficult struggle that he's dealing with. And so while that's going on, he's subconsciously pushing his best friend and his girlfriend into situations where like he asks Chris to go pick Larissa up, or they he bails on them when they go on a walk together, so they end up on this like 11-mile
Hike,
walk hike
dramatic hike.
thing. Very dramatic hike. And so it's just difficult because it's hard to see Mike in these situations, but at the same time I want Chris and Larissa to be together. So it was just very interesting as a reader to try and juggle those two very different emotions.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think Abby Jimenez does a really good job of making us see that Chris and Larissa are, like you said, such a better fit for each other than Larissa and Mike. But even though over the course of the book, Larissa and Mike are dating for an entire year, we don't really see very much of their relationship. We see Chris and Larissa interacting, I think, more than we ever saw Larissa and Mike interacting.
Which I do think it makes the emotional cheating more tolerable to read, at least for me it was, because it's still obviously emotional cheating, but because it's like you said, we barely see Mike and Larissa together. And when they are together, Larissa talks about how she is like uncomfortable because Mike talks too much or he's too loud, or there are just things to his personality that don't mesh with hers super well. So it's like every situation that they're in together is uncomfortable for someone, or they don't really seem like they want to hang out that badly.
Hmm.
So while it is, of course, emotional cheating, I had an easier time reading it because it made it seem like Chris and Larissa should just be together anyway.
Hmm. Especially because some of the things that she says convince her to like Mike, like him being really thoughtful about his gifts, are
Mm-hmm.
things that he is urged to do by Chris. They're Chris's ideas for the gifts. They're Chris's ideas to like do these special things for her. And Mike is able to kind of take credit and then fib a little bit about things that will make him look better just because he wants so badly to be worthy of Larissa, for Larissa to like him. Speaking of gifts, Mike is maybe not the best gift giver when it comes to Larissa. He does not have the instinct for what she will view as a good gift. And I think the first instance of that coming up is when he wants to get her a giant teddy bear for her birthday. And he tells Chris this, and Chris is like, she's not gonna want that. She lives in a tiny apartment with her mom. Why would she want something that takes up so much room? And Mike's like, I don't know. I thought it would be sweet. And then Chris says, you should get her this instead. And even though like gift giving is not the most important thing in the world in a relationship, I do think in this instance, it really showed how much Chris knew Larissa a little bit better, that
Yeah.
he was driven by like what she would like to receive rather than like what is something that will seem cute to give to her. What did you think about this dynamic?
I thought a similar thing. I did roll my eyes a little bit because Chris is like, okay, here's what you should get her. And it's this custom jewelry box, which is very sweet because she likes jewelry. So that part of it is sweet. But the part that made me roll my eyes a little bit is that he was like, and I just happened to find this custom jewelry box maker's Instagram. And I know that this would be the right person because they carve beautifully wonderful, intricate jewelry boxes. And I just was like, I'm sorry, you just happened upon like a custom jewelry box maker the other day, like that just appeared in your feed. Like the algorithm goes by, what you what it thinks you're looking for. So I just rolled my eyes a little bit at that because it seemed a little too perfect, but I do agree that it showed like Chris clearly has a better idea of what she would like because then she does love it and it's like the perfect gift for her and it turns out to be this great idea. But I thought maybe it was a little over the top in the way that it was delivered.
Yeah, well, it turns out to be the only thing that she wants, like, from Mike's apartment when they end up breaking up. It's the only thing that she wants to go back and save because she's like, even though it didn't work out with us, that was such a nice gift and I like it so much. And at this point, she doesn't know that Chris had picked it out for her. So it's just, yeah, very, very, like you said, very telling, but very, like, weird that he would, that he was doing this already.
One gift that comes up later, this is farther along, but Mike gets Larissa a box of French macaroons and has them like shipped in, I think. I think it's like
Hmm.
from a patisserie in France. And Chris looks at the box because Mike wants his opinion. And Chris is like, your girlfriend can't eat these. They have nuts in them. They use almond flour. She's allergic to these. Like she will die if you give her these cookies.
You got her poison for Christmas.
Right. Like you have way missed the mark because you will cause her to go into anaphylactic shock if she eats these. And Mike in his I think he's drunk during this interaction or on his way to being drunk in during this interaction, but anyway, it spurs kind of a breakdown about like I'm such a bad boyfriend, I can't get anything right, how am I so dumb? I can't remember this for her, and really causes a spiral which I think is very indicative of his mental health in the moment. But also, mental health aside, you should probably know what gifts will cause your significant other to die. That does seem like something you would maybe at least like jot down.
Feels like a low bar to cross
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah.
But not everybody knows, I guess, that macarons have almond flour. So,
That's true. That's true. If you're not thinking about it in that much detail. And he says like Mike does say like, well, the flavors aren't nut flavors. Like
mhm,
he's thinking about it in terms of whatever they are, strawberry, I don't remember. But
mhm.
um so I guess if you don't do the research, but then it shows how Chris does do his research because he knows that.
Yeah.
I saw this in a review and I want your thoughts because it's on the subject of her allergy. Did you feel like her allergy was mentioned a lot? Because I saw quite a few reviews that felt like it was a little overdone in how
Oh,
many
really?
times it was mentioned. Yeah.
Um, I did not think that it was overdone, but I think that's maybe just because, like, if that is your reality, that you have a very severe allergy that's so
Hmm.
bad that if it's even in the room or like even in the kitchen, that it could potentially affect you. I think that would just kind of be a reality of life that it's something that you're always thinking about. I think
Hmm.
maybe Chris mentioned it too much because, like we said before, he was protective to the point of obsessiveness. But I think
Yeah.
like her being aware of her allergy was not over the top. And again, is just maybe the reality of people who live with very, very severe allergies. What did you think?
I had a similar reaction. I didn't really think about it in the amount of times it was mentioned because I felt like it was mentioned naturally.
Hmm.
Like when they go on long drives, because Chris is, for some reason, the only person available in the town they all live in to drive Larissa everywhere they need to go.
Hmm.
Whatever, they always need to carpool for some reason. And but on when they would be carpooling, they would talk about like getting lunch on the way because it's a long drive, so they want to stop to eat. So then it was, oh, we need to research in advance to make sure we choose a restaurant where Larissa can go in safely. So I didn't think that Larissa brought it up a lot. I thought that the way that it showed how she had to think about it in all of those little situations was good perspective on somebody who does have an allergy that's so severe because I don't have food allergies, so I thought that it was good perspective to see someone who has to think about every situation that they're in and how they would handle it. Like something as simple as, can she go into a place where they're going to for a quick stop? So I didn't think it was too much, except for Chris becoming obsessive, like we talked about and you said.
Yes, speaking of those negative reviews, though, I feel like
Mm-hmm.
I saw a lot of people very concerned about the emotional cheating, which I get. I think that
Mm-hmm.
in order to enjoy this book, you have to be able to get on board with the idea that, there is this moral gray area. And
Mm-hmm.
Chris and Larissa, I think, do their best not to cross too many boundaries. Obviously, people will have different opinions about that, but they don't really express their feelings or get together until after Mike and Larissa break up for an
Mm-hmm.
unrelated reason. They don't break up because of Chris, um, even though he is, obviously involved at that very dramatic scene where Mike is so upset because he's having issues with Larissa and he eats the macarons and then he kisses her and she starts having an allergic reaction and he kind of like forces himself on her because she does not want to be kissed and then she
Yeah.
starts like almost dying. This was such an intense scene. And I think it kind of made sense after that Larissa would be like, "We're done."
Yes, it was awful and it was hard to read. And it was because, like you said, it was so intense. And he's in his drunken state, forcing himself on her, trying to get her to kiss him. Like he's like sobbing, she's crying, obviously, because she's being assaulted by her boyfriend while she's like, while her throat is closing, she can't breathe. And it was just like not a scene that I was prepared for. I was not expecting such a intense, dark, almost deadly scene to occur in this book. And I don't know. I feel like there maybe should have been a more clear content warning about that. But it was just really hard to read and it was unsettling. And then I feel bad for Larissa because she's stuck in this situation where she's like at the cabin because they like go up to a cabin with their friends for the week between Christmas and New Year's, which is when this all goes down. And so they're like in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing around them. They're up in the woods. And if she doesn't have her EpiPen and Chris hadn't brought a spare, like it would have been a very different story. And that is just so like chilling to think about.
Absolutely. And that's also kind of Chris's breaking point, I think, where he's like, I could have sat back and let you guys be a couple because you're in love and I love Larissa as a friend and I love Mike as a friend, so they can be happy and I can try to move on with my doctor girlfriend or with somebody. But
Mm-hmm.
when Mike caused harm to Larissa, that's kind of when he stopped caring and was like, I have to do something.
And then he punches Mike in the face.
Mhm. Great, great, great moment. Which, I mean, Mike kind of deserved it in that moment, but again, because we'd been seeing Mike's character, I had a lot of sympathy for him.
And I also struggled because Chris sucks in a few ways, but one of
Hmm.
them that stuck out to me the most was his with his doctor girlfriend, like you mentioned. He starts dating, her name is
Heather,
Heather. He's
Heather.
yes. He starts dating Heather and she's this beautiful, smart, wonderful doctor, quite a catch, lovely person from what we see. She's not in it a lot, but nothing that she did caused me to think she wasn't a good person, I guess. Um, but he refers to her as a stand-in. And
Yeah.
I was so upset because it's one thing to say, like, okay, I'm getting over somebody. I'm going to start dating casually to try and, like, help me get over these feelings. Like, you're trying to get past somebody. I think that that's understandable. I think a lot of
Hmm.
people do that. But to actively start dating someone and, like, push them to become your girlfriend in a, I think it's 2 week time period. Take them on an overnight, week long trip with your six closest friends and then refer to them as your stand in is disgusting.
Yeah, I think even if he wasn't referring to her as that to other people, the fact that he labeled her a stand-in in his mind was maybe a sign that they should not be together.
Yes.
Because I agree, like even beyond dating casually, I think people can be in relationships without like completely being over the previous person, and like maybe being in a better relationship like helps them to really realize that the previous relationship was not as good as they thought it was, or maybe like the previous person they thought they wanted to be with is not the right relationship for them. And so I think a lot of people, like you said, do that. Will try to date or be in relationships with people while still healing from
Hmm.
past heartbreak. And I think that that's reasonable. What I don't think is reasonable is being like, this is just the placeholder until I can convince the other person to be with me, or like until I can convince myself, whatever, whatever. I think just the language around that, excuse me, the language around that is the big issue.
And on top of treating her this way or thinking of her this way, he also uses her to get an EpiPen for Larissa, which, again, it's great that he has an EpiPen in the moment because they're not able to get to Larissa's in time. So, yes, it turns out to be the right thing that they have a spare, but the way that he goes about getting a spare and using his girlfriend to get medication for the girl he likes is all sorts of like messed up.
And he kind of mentions in passing that he was able to get this EpiPen from his doctor girlfriend, or the prescription rather, but he
Mm-hmm.
never gives us what that conversation was, or why he said that it was so essential that he needed an EpiPen. I would have been curious if he told her the real reason or not.
Yeah.
And again, that's something that we just don't see.
Like, what was the conversation that made her okay with it? Because if I was the doctor and someone asked me to fake a prescription for their friend, I would simply say no.
Well, I don't know. Different people are different people. But yeah, no, I agree. I
So,
was like, okay.
I do think one thing we should talk about that I found a little bit hard to believe was the fact that Larissa is so confused about her feelings for Chris because she makes a lot of comments about how she's like unsure why the thought of Chris sleeping with somebody else bothers her, or she doesn't realize why that's upsetting to her. And I just struggled with that because I thought, like, really, you don't know? Like, you haven't figured out why that thought bothers you? Like, I find that a little hard to believe that after being in a very close relationship with Chris for almost a year, like the same period of time that she's dating Mike, you would not understand that those feelings that you have are because you are interested in Chris.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. She's very oblivious to it until very late in the book. And
Yes.
that the whole idea that she would not have any inkling that she had feelings for him is a little silly.
Especially because quite a few people around her call it out. Like her best friend Lexi is like, I think says like smash or pass at one point, and
Mm.
Larissa's like, I'm not going to answer. And Lexi says, well, the fact that you won't answer means that you like him. Like,
Which was a valid point. The fact
yes,
that she was willing
exactly.
to entertain it said something.
She thought about it. That's all I'm saying. But I do think that transitions us to what is perhaps the most unrealistic thing that happens in this book.
Go ahead.
Okay, it comes at the end. Mike and Chris are not speaking after Chris punches Mike in the face for obvious reasons. They go through a span of, I think it's like 3 months ish that they're not talking. Uh, and then Mike comes to Chris's work at the pharmacy to pick up his, I think it's depression medication, and kind of is trying to make an effort to have Chris see that, okay, trying to get myself back on the right track. I'm back on my medication. I want to talk to you. I want to apologize. And Mike gives this very heartfelt, seems to be genuine apology. I thought it was coming from a genuine place anyway. But Mike tells Chris that Chris is the great love of his life. And
Which is sweet. It's very
it
I love you,
is.
man.
It's like the sentiment is wonderful. I just could not picture any guy friends that I have saying that to each other, like seriously saying, "You're the great love of my life."
I could see the like general sentiment being expressed of like, oh, we're
Hmm.
besties, I love you, but not like
Yeah.
this felt very, very grand gestury, which I guess maybe you have to do after you punch your best friend in the face.
And I just thought like it didn't fit with Mike's character too, with
Mm,
what we had seen of Mike. And I know at this point we're supposed to see he's healing, he's trying to become healthy, he's not drinking, etc. But Mike, the whole book, is not like an emotional person. He's not someone who's really open with his feelings. And so because we don't see that 3 month period transition where he is becoming more like aware of his feelings, more aware of his emotions. It was just very out of the blue, I thought, for him to go from like, Chris, can you come pick me up because I'm too drunk to drive, to you're the great love of my life. It was just like a little whiplashy. But, maybe there are guy friends who say that to each other and I don't know about it. So,
yeah, I think I want to encourage people to be very open about loving their friends. So I think it was
yeah.
good, but like you said, it did kind of give me pause in the moment because I was like, I don't know if this has been Mike's character to express himself in this way.
Yes, it felt like an attempt to really show this wild growth phase that we didn't see, this like
Hmm.
extreme growth that he has supposedly had during this time frame.
Okay.
And I just was like, maybe if it's the book where Mike is the main character and we've seen him a little bit more developed, we've seen a little bit more of the effort to become healthier, maybe then it would fit better. But it was like in this particular book, after their last interaction was Chris punching Mike in the face and then basically cutting him out of his life, it just didn't really fit for me.
Now to get into some fun segments. First is going to be a segment that we call Trope Watch, where we talk about a bunch of different popular tropes that showed up in this book. First of all is the obvious.
Boyfriend's best friend. This is obviously the entire premise.
I don't think I've ever read another book that is this trope. And it's not like I'm itching to read more, but I was impressed that she was able to pull it off because I think it is something that, again, exists in sort of a moral gray area. So it was at least compelling.
It was, and I almost wondered because I couldn't think of any other books with this. There was a part of me that was like, is it common enough to be a trope? Which I think it is, but it's just not common enough to me. So I was
Yeah.
like, oh, interesting.
Yeah, comment your favorite boyfriend's best friend trope books down below so that we can read them. I think it has the potential to be like fun drama in other situations as well. I think that the tropes that I am most skeptical of in real life
Hmm.
are sometimes the most interesting to read because they really, really have to convince me. Like
Yeah.
a second chance romance, most of the time, I think if people break up, it's for a good reason. And so
Hmm.
if they're able to convince me that the characters should get back together, then I'm like, oh, that was a really compelling romance. And I think it's kind of similar in this case. I'm like, in real life, no, no, no. But in a book, it's interesting.
I couldn't put myself into the situation to empathize with the characters, but like we talked about at the beginning, the drama from the side view was entertaining.
Exactly. Yes. Okay, another trope that I think shows up in a lot of romance novels is a disastrous adventure that pushes our characters together. And in this case, it was the hike that Mike bailed on them for. They were supposed to all three of them go on a hike. And instead, it's just Chris and Larissa, and they have a terrible time. It rains on them. They're walking like 11 miles, and this one event is such a disaster that it really bonds them.
Yes, and they go through the rest of the book referring to it as their trauma bond,
Hmm.
which by the point we got to the end and they were still referring to their trauma bond, I was a little like, okay, now you're just kind of taking away the importance of what a trauma bond is. Like you're kind of cheapening it a little bit. But it does bring them together. And before we move on, I need to do some math because this section made me wonder.
Hmm.
So it's an 11-mile hike.
Okay.
Mike says when he bails that it's a really nice hike and it only takes about an hour or an hour and a half to do. and they're on this hike and they're going for such a long time and they're like, oh my gosh, how long is it? And they call Mike. Mike says it's an hour and a half if he runs the hike. We need to discuss the math
Okay.
because I'm just trying to figure out how fast would you have to run to go at 11 miles in an hour and a half?
That is a great question, and I will sit here quietly while you do the math. It's not my strong suit.
This results to, okay, I'm just Googling it because I don't want to do the math. But to travel 11 miles in 90 minutes, you must maintain a steady speed of 7.3 miles per hour or a
Huh.
pace of 8 minutes and 11 seconds per
Oh,
mile.
okay.
Okay, so it's not unheard of.
Yeah, that's not crazy. I
When
thought
I
it would be
read
like he
it,
runs a 5 minute mile. I was like, whoa, that's
yes, when I
fast.
read it, I was like, that can't possibly be true. But according to this calculator, on calculator.net, pace calculator,
Oh, okay.
8 minutes and 11 seconds.
Nice. Okay. No, I think that feels reasonable for his character because they talk a lot about how he is very fit and he, in fact, wants to be a personal trainer. Right now, he's working as a plumber, which is, a good career for him. And Larissa's really encouraging it, but he's not passionate about it. He wants to be a personal trainer. So there's really an emphasis on his fitness.
Mhm.
Okay, another big trope. I feel like I see this in a lot of romances as well, is like the whole gang goes to a cabin or like it's specifically a cabin. I feel like that comes up a lot. I can't
Mhm.
name one off the top of my head, but that was another trope. A silly animal side character. We have spoken at length about Woofarine, so I won't get too deep into that. But the other thing is, it's such a trope, not only in romances, but just in books and movies in general of having this terrible mother-in-law. And although she does not become like officially a mother-in-law in this case,
Mhm.
the mother of Mike in this book and his sister as well are kind of terrible to Larissa for really no reason. And I couldn't really glean why they hated her so much, if they had always hated her even before she started dating Mike because
Mhm.
they all work at the same restaurant, or if there was some sort of like push and pull because of her relationship with Mike. Were you able to get a better read on that?
No, and I kept waiting for some context because it was like Larissa just says every time I'm there or every time I see Donna, the almost mother in law, she's like, I feel like she just hates me. She doesn't want to talk to me. She doesn't even look at me. But Mike is apparently not picking up on it, which made me feel like it couldn't be super outward if Mike has not noticed that his mom and sister hate Larissa. Like if they were openly belittling her in front of him, you think he would
You
probably
would
pick up
hope.
on that.
You would hope.
But I didn't understand why they hated her. It was
No,
not
but
clear.
I'm curious moving forward in the next book, if it is about Mike, if their behavior towards Larissa is similar toward whoever the love interest is in that book, um, and how that's addressed, or if it's just specifically Larissa that they hate.
Well, and Donna is so awful to Larissa to the point that when Larissa and Mike break up, Donna changes the restaurant menu so that all of the new featured options have peanut butter or peanuts. It's like peanut
Mhm.
butter pancakes, peanut butter toast. It's like she literally changes the menu to something that could kill Larissa because she hates her so strongly.
And when Mike finds out about that, to his credit, he is very upset, but he
Yes.
he doesn't notice it for a long time. Moving on to our next segment, we're going to do a little bit of fan casting. So I think we're just going to do the three main characters, Larissa, Chris, and Mike. Do you want to go first?
No,
Or do
you
you want to
should.
do one actor at a time?
No, let's do one actor at a time. I will
Okay,
preface this by saying I'm really bad at this, so I'm gonna give it my all.
that's okay. It's our first time. We will get better. Who's your Larissa?
No, you go first.
Oh, okay. I'll go first. So when I was casting Larissa in my head, I did not imagine these actors in my head as I was reading. I'm kind of like retroactively trying to put a person on it because
Hmm.
I think when I read a lot of times I just see like a faceless, like what I don't often have specific people. But I
Yeah.
was trying to pick somebody who would be so focused on her career that she would maybe become oblivious to somebody very obviously in front of her having feelings for her.
Hmm.
So the people that I came up with first was Simone Ashley. She was in
Oh,
season 2 of Bridgerton. I just
love
think
her.
that she has kind of like a no nonsense, like take no shit kind of attitude that I see in Larissa.
She's also going to be in how in The Devil Wears Prada 2, which I'm very excited
I
about.
saw that. I saw that. I think she would be a good one. The other one that I was kind of thinking of was Dakota Fanning. I think she also has that kind of similar energy, um, where she's just like I said, just so professional, so no nonsense in a way that I think is similar to Larissa. But then I think both of those characters could also play up like a goofy, or both of those actresses rather, could also play up a goofy, like we have a crazy dog sort of side plot.
That's so funny you say Dakota Fanning because I was actually going to say Elle Fanning for similar reasons, but
Okay.
um, maybe more so because just her general vibe and kind of aesthetic, I guess, is how I would picture Larissa and kind of her bearing, if that makes sense. Like the way she holds herself, the way she presents herself, gave me a vibe that I think she could really pull off a Larissa character, but also still have a little more of that humor where necessary.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I love Elle Fanning, so it's funny that we both went for a Fanning's.
And speaking of Bridgerton, I do think Jonathan Bailey could be Chris. I think Jonathan Bailey could be a lot of people,
You
but
just love Jonathan Bailey.
I do love Jonathan Bailey, and that is why I will choose him in probably every time we do this.
So is that your official Chris?
That's someone who I would be happy to see as Chris. I don't know,
Okay.
official feels a little much, but I wouldn't be upset to see Jonathan Bailey cast as Chris.
Who else did you have in mind for Chris?
No, that was it. Just the one.
Oh, just him? Okay, I thought okay. I thought you would have other I thought you'd have other people. Okay. My Chris, when I was casting this character, I feel like I was torn between if I wanted to go for like actors who seemed like they had the intensity that Chris exhibits. He's, like we've talked about, very protective to the point of like it being a little intense.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, there's also quite a nerdy side to him. So I wasn't sure if I should be prioritizing that instead. So what I ended up landing on, Fabian Frankel, he was in House of Dragon. I haven't watched that. I actually have never watched him in anything, but he was one of the rumored people to play Gus in Beach Read before the Gus
Oh.
casting was announced. And so that's how I like saw a picture of him to begin with. And I think when you look him up and you see him, you'll notice again that he has this like sort of dark brooding intensity that I think would lend itself well to the character of Chris.
I think the nerdier side is what I associated when I was thinking of people, and that's more why I think that I could see Jonathan Bailey is because of that nerdiness. Like if you've seen him in the new Jurassic Park movie, he's
Hmm.
very nerdy scientist kind of vibe. So that side of Chris, that more sciencey nerdy side is what I had in my head with that.
Okay, the other person for Chris, and this is like you said, opposite, more nerdy than intense,
Hmm.
is Jonah Howard King. He was Prince Eric in the live action Little Mermaid, and I think he has sort of a sad puppy dog thing going on that would also lend itself well to Chris's character.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, let's move on to Mike. Tell me about your
This is
Mike.
Mike was actually the easiest one for me to fan cast. I will preface by saying I'm picturing a younger the younger actor, because I picture John Barenthal as Mike, not his current age, but when he was younger is what I'm getting at.
Okay.
Um, but I think that he has such an ability to play really complex characters, particularly ones with a lot of emotional responses. Like, generally, he plays people who have some anger issues or people who are struggling with something emotionally that they're not showing outwardly. So, kind of that brooding, darker, working through some shit, I would associate with Mike.
Okay. Okay. I took my mic in a very different direction.
Oh,
Like a complete different direction. I cast Leo Woodall. Um, I think that Mike needs to have like levity to him and like a goofiness and a silliness and like a party kind of vibe so that it
hmm,
would be very like difficult for Larissa to see that he was struggling for a long
sure.
time because it does take her a very long time to like find out what he is dealing with because he's able to put on such a happy smiley front. And so that's why I think that this character or this actor, I keep saying character, that's why I think this actor could be a really, really good Mike. And I also think, at least in all of the things that I've seen him in, he gives off a very like flirty energy, and so I could see the character of Larissa like being swept off her feet by him the first night they met and maybe overlooking somebody else who could be a better
Sure.
fit. And that brings us to our next segment, which is going to be if you could change one thing about this book, what would you change and why?
This is the section I've been the most excited about. I'm very excited to talk about this.
Nice.
If I could change one thing, I would make Chris less obsessive because I think that there is a shift about halfway through the book where the romantic aspects of the things that he's doing just turn into obsessive, like, you need to take a step back. And you see the interest in, like we talked about, him having a better idea of what a good present would be for Larissa. And I thought, oh, that's indicative of his thoughtfulness. He's sweet. I like that. I like that he knows what she would like. But when it came to getting up in the middle of the night to go to her house and shovel the sidewalk or obsessively checking her medication when he is not her pharmacist, he is not her doctor, like, you need to take a step back. She's a grown woman. A big point in the book is that she wants to be independent. She wants to take care of herself. She doesn't want to be taken care of, even though she appreciates it. But it gets to the point where it's like, you're just being obsessive. Like, you need to find another way to use your time. Join a pickleball league, perhaps. Take up running. Read more books. You talk about how you love books. Don't go to your best friend's girlfriend's apartment in the middle of the night to shovel her sidewalk and not tell anyone about it. That's weird.
Yeah, he did get a little weird. He did definitely get a little weird. I mean, it does show that love can make you crazy.
And it does represent that his love language is acts of service, like you said
Mhm.
earlier. So I do get that part of it, but after a while I was like, we're supposed to be viewing Larissa as like a strong, independent woman, and
Mhm.
I can't necessarily see that if it's so heavily layered in that Chris is constantly finding opportunities to take care of her that she didn't ask for. It just
Yeah.
makes it like overshadows her, I think.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know. I kind
Mhm.
of liked not when it got so extreme that he was waking up in the middle of the night to shovel her walkway, but I did find like some of the ways that he tried to help her very endearing because it felt like he was trying to empower her. It didn't ever feel like he was trying to take agency away from her,
Sure.
in my opinion. But I could totally see how it could be viewed that way.
What would you change? Let's hear it.
I think they're at the end of the book, after Mike and Larissa have broken up, and now Larissa and Chris are together, and there's a big time jump between them deciding to get together and then them reuniting with this friend group and sort of starting to build the bridge towards maintaining these friendships, which were harmed or at least put at risk by
Hmm.
the way that they got together, or just the fact that she was dating a different person in the friend group and now is with someone else. And I know that that's something that would take time, but I didn't love that there was so much development that happened off page. And it
Hmm.
makes me wonder if the book would have been stronger if they had gotten together sooner. And instead of it being so much build up to them getting together, we would have been able to see more of the fallout and how them getting together affected these dynamics. And, it was something that they were so afraid of, was damaging these friendships. So seeing the way that the friendships had to adjust, I think maybe would have been more interesting. It's similar to the problem that I had with Just for the Summer, actually, because at
Hmm.
the end of that book as well, there's a lot of character development that happens off page before we get the happily ever after. A lot of things, both in this book and that book, that happen off page to be able to resolve plot points. And I just, in general, prefer when I see everything happening, again, on page.
Especially when it's such important development, because it did make this ending feel very abrupt to me, because it
Mm.
was like, okay, they're together. Like we said earlier, Chris has cut all of his friends out of his life because he is choosing Larissa over his friends. And then all of a sudden, he and Mike have their moment in the parking lot of Chris's pharmacy. And then it's like 6 months later, everyone's fine with it. We've all
Yeah.
moved on. Mike is still like not able to hang out with Chris and Larissa, understandably, but he's trying to be okay with it. And the other friends in the friend group who Chris is so worried will cut him out are just like, okay, well, Chris and Larissa now. We love them. Like, and it's not like I want the friendships to be over, but like you said, it would have been nice to kind of see how the relationships were impacted so we could see how they got through it as a couple.
Right, that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you so, so much for listening to the end. We are so grateful. Again, don't forget to rate us 5 stars, like us, and follow us, whether you're on Spotify or on YouTube. But make sure also to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at A Good Day for Book Club Pod, and send us an email if you want. We would love to receive an email at agooddayforbookclubpod@gmail.com.
And in the meantime, happy reading.
Happy reading!